Okay, I have covered crappy media for a very long time, but seldom am I at a loss for words. And let's first show, to set this up, Brian Stelter has always argued, here's my problem with Stelter and Cuomo and even Tapper. I don't have a problem with Rachel Maddow. I have to reiterate this because sometimes people don't understand. They go, why don't you go after Maddow or O'Donnell? Here's why. I almost said Chris O'Donnell from Batman and Robin.
You could go after both, really.
Lawrence O'Donnell is the hammering guy.
It's a crime all in of
Chris O'Donnell was the one who had a
hammering.
fling with Alicia Silverstone. What happened to her? I don't know.
Don't ask.
Oh, sorry. I thought something was relevant on CNN. It's not, because they want to avoid the riots and ambush of the LAPD.
What's about the Big Ten? I'm good with it.
Brian Stelter, Chris Cuomo, these guys, they still maintain that they are journalists. They say, we are going after the facts, and we will call the powerful to the mat, and we will speak to the issues that matter. We are unbiased. We are truthful. That is why they bother me so much, because here is something. Child pornography, one could argue, is a layup.
Should be.
Like, if there's one
easy.
thing you should be anti, that both the left and the right, okay, child pornography would be at the top of that list, especially when you consider the fact that Brian Stelter has openly talked about. Here's a montage of how objective and truthful his program is.
I tell you what, we are in a truth emergency right now. Of course, news outlets make mistakes. Of course, politicians make mistakes. The dividing line is between those who seek the truth and try to avoid mistakes and try to learn from them.
And us.
Versus those who don't give a rat's arse about the truth.
Oh.
And don't cop to mistakes, and they just lie their way through life. So what's the role of the press in this broken environment? In part, our role is to keep collecting facts, all of the facts, so that citizens can make up their own minds. But I think it's also our role to stand up for decency and morality.
Really?
Especially if others won't.
Decency and morality. Would an 11-year-old's tits qualify, Mr. Stelter? I know, not really an 11-year-old's, but just, it's supposed to be, so that pedophiles at home on Netflix creates the illusion. Like my thumb, right? It's like that, only with an 11-year-old's tits. It's not real, but it's meant to be titillating for pedophiles. So, this is what's interesting. Last week, our number one segment was on Cuties.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, everyone copied our title where we said Cuties
It was a big
released
story
and it's
going
worse
around.
than you thought, and it was the same title everywhere else, which I don't care about. I'm glad, though, that the word is getting out about Cuties and just how awful it
disgusting.
truly is. I wasn't able to watch all of it because I don't feel that I need to at this point. And I'm a big believer in portraying reality so that people know what they're talking about. But at a certain point, it's like, listen, there's no argument that makes it acceptable to even show simulated sexual undulating from 9 to 11-year-olds. It's just morally reprehensible. But it was the biggest story anywhere, Cuties. It was so big, as a matter of fact, that we have Josh Hawley, Tom Cotton, Jim Banks, and Ted Cruz sent a letter to the Attorney General, Bill Barr, asking them to investigate. So there's a call right now to investigate whether Netflix, its executives, or filmmakers violated any federal laws against production and distribution of child pornography. Now, here's what was amazing. I watched all day Sunday, all morning Sunday, CNN. Brian Stelter did an interview with the founder and CEO of Netflix. He just talked, we just showed you, it's our job to gather the facts, to let the citizens make there was not one question about Cuties. Can you think of any other story from Netflix recently?
Nothing.
What, Hillary Swank's away? She hasn't been relevant since she taped her titties down to play a boy. The old boys don't cry, titless wonder, give her an Oscar. Since then, nobody cares. So the point is, Cuties is the story from Netflix, and Brian Stelter asked nothing. His argument was, well, you know what, it was pre-taped. Well, guess what? Cuties was a story still even a few days ago.
A week earlier?
He should, at that point, because before it had been released, he could have said, well, you know what, people are really worried about this release of Cuties because the number one trends for weeks were, hey, this could be a violation of child pornography.
Right. The poster came out
Instead, he didn't ask. But even worse than that is Poppy Harlow, who is very fetching, I will give her that, did an interview the next day, I guess, after the pre-tape. She didn't ask about Cuties. So two interviews from CNN, the bastion of truth. Facts first is their slogan. Not a single question about the show that has actually spurred demands for an investigation into child pornography distribution and violation of laws.
And their stocks just plummeted. Like,
whether you think it is or not, and we'll ask Bill where he can explain to us where he lines up. Enough viewers think it's an issue. And keep in mind, this is at the same time that Governor Gavin Newsom just signed a bill into law where they lowered sex penalties for sex offenders with who abuse minors. So this is California. Like we said, slippery slope. There's no more slope anymore. It's look behind you. The slope was slippery, and now it's eroded.
It's gone.
Just completely.
I think it's just a cliff at this point. Just straight to
No, there's no more cliff. Now the cliff, it's moved down like in Tremors.
Oh.
So, okay, so this is, I want to know where you guys line up because I don't want to I try and avoid sensationalizing. Cuties made me sick to my stomach to watch it. That's why we had Brendan and Bryce twerk for you because I was like, I can't show it.
No, you can't do that. And I saw it, unfortunately, some of those.
You watched the whole thing?
No. Some people were sending out clips initially, and then they were like, this is a bad idea to send out clips, which was absolutely right. Don't send out clips.
I told you not to let Joe Biden DM you.
It was Anthony Weiner.
Yeah.
So a couple things. One, so there, without question, like looking at the content of the movie and the description of it and the way that it's been portrayed is without question we've crossed a moral line. And so then you get to the question of the legal line, right?
Right.
And so a couple points. First of all, a lot of folks are like, well, I looking for child porn law and I can't find a law that says child porn. That's because it's more accurately described, and the word they actually use is CSAM. Child sexual abuse material. Because any act of filming a child in any of these types of situations is an act of abuse, and circulating that material is another form of child sexual abuse. So I actually appreciate that word is used because there could be pornography that is legal, and there's all child pornography. However that term, it's not a legal term, but however that term is used, definitely bad.
Right.
The reason we use a specific term is because it's bad, and
because it's also broader than just pornography that would be
absolutely
it gives us more protection of minors as opposed to, for example, with pornography, if there's no consent, obviously that's illegal. If there's an abuse of other laws, but you're saying with this, it's broad enough that any depiction of sexual activity.
Well, and the whole point is because a child cannot consent, right? Because of the idea that
hormone blockers, but that's another day. Yeah.
Right. I mean, we could just change their entire biological makeup and it's totally fine. But but separate and apart from the definition of the word CSAM is the question of people often ask, and actually the NCMEC, which is the National Center for Missing and Endangered Children, they often get questioned. Federal authorities get a question like, oh man, like my parents took a photo of me when I was like in the bathtub or like as a very young kid, right?
Right.
And so there's one set of categories of when you're actually engaged in sexual acts, no question, very, always bad, no question at all. Then there's this question of how do you have a test that decides when material is lascivious enough, is usually the word used in most state and in the federal statutes, to decide is this depiction intended to be sexual? Is it intended to be erotic? Is it intended to?
I would think cheeky shorts and sports bras with girls rubbing their groin would suffice, but that's opinion.
That's why when you look at the context and how it's presented, that's really where the main problem, regardless of whether it actually crosses the legal threshold of child pornography or CSAM, those particular issues, is the question of is this the kind of thing that we are encouraging children to engage in sexual materials? Now, I know what the rebuttals have been, right? The rebuttals have been, well, it's actually a critique of that. It's actually saying we don't think that these young women should be doing it, so we showed a bunch of it. Oh, but don't worry, the parents were horrified when they watched it. Something,
Okay.
But we
should the casting call.
Yeah.
Well, exactly. No. This is like during the actual film. So that's what
yeah.
But a point, Quarter Black made this point earlier before the show is, remember, you mentioned this in the very first show on Cuties when you said 650, and the director said, "Oh, she was 651."
Right.
Where's the film of the 650?
You mean people who auditioned?
Of the people who auditioned.
Yeah.
Where are all the back films of all these different folks? And
how do you audition for this?
Yeah.
Do they just sit you down and go like, what are your measurements? And she goes, I don't know. I wear small from Kid Gap. I'm like, she's Noelle McPherson.
I mean, slap it a couple times though.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Can you please twerk?
So you
for
think
us?
that do you think? I don't think this is political grandstanding. It seems like there's enough there to at least have some kind of an investigation.
Absolutely.
Yes.
I think the investigation is warranted. I don't think that they, in the face of the initial questions, it shouldn't have been, oh, it's fine, it's art. It should have been, let us demonstrate exactly how we took every step possible to prevent this even coming close to the line of being.
And I tell you what, I'm really worried when we talk about slippery slope. It's obviously Arnold Schwarzenegger. I don't know if you can bring this up, given people. I don't think people will question me, and this is a well-known story. He was stopped when he was coming into the country with bodybuilding magazines because of women in bikinis and thongs, and that was seen as pornography. That was seen as you and Johnny Cochran put it, lascivious, outrageous. So that was seen as lascivious enough where it was a problem.
Yeah.
And now we've obviously changed where basically what would once be considered hardcore pornography is an advertisement for lingerie, where you can just find it walking through the mall or on a billboard for once upon a time American Apparel. And I don't want to see that eroding of the standard with children.
Yeah.
I don't want people to go, like you see with that Slate article, going, oh, this is from QAnon, faux outrage reactionaries from the right. You know what? A 9-year-old girl rubbing her reproductive organs on camera in cheeky shorts. Yep, I'm reactionary. Because if that's my daughter, I'm strangling the director. So I also have a problem. I want to look into what I think these parents, I can't believe that they would subject them to that.
Yeah.
But I don't want to see that ball get moved at all. I think it's too far in the fact that this film was released in any capacity. So I want to be crystal clear about this. When we talk about protecting the most vulnerable among us, and this is true, with the left, they don't believe that. They always end up victimizing the most vulnerable among us. Let's look at COVID. We are taking the exact wrong tack with COVID if we want to protect old people. What are we doing? We're locking everybody down so that at some point it doesn't stop the virus. When we go back out, old people will be just as at risk, and more of them will die, granted in between now and then if we're in states where Governor Whitmer or Cuomo has sent young people into nursing homes, but the exact wrong strategy to protect the most vulnerable among us, the sick and the old. What should we do? We should go on with our lives in society and help older people and sick people stay home. But because we need to politically grandstand, because we need to go out there with the optics and say, hey, look, we flattened the curve, we're going to put older people at risk. Right now, when we talk about women of color, right? Women of color, me too. Well, we are doing the exact wrong thing when you demonize officers who are responding to calls of either serial rapists or sexual abusers, or people, like we talked about today in Lancaster, currently with a knife abusing this woman. When a woman of color calls 2-3 times in a row, and the police officers defend that woman who can't defend herself by force, using force, and then you say, we need to defund the police. So what are we doing? We are putting people in minority communities most at risk through that policy. Same thing right now when we're looking at children, when we talk about pornography laws, and we talk about artistic license. Well, you know what, conservatives, this is the problem, is when you don't teach sex ed, guess what? They go out and all of a sudden they're like a kid in a candy shop. Well, you know what? Maybe once upon a time that was a valid argument, but now you have kids twerking and humping couches at 9 years old, and you're distributing it to people who could be God knows how old on the world's biggest multimedia platform, and the media doesn't make you answer for it at all. This false culture of victimhood always creates more real victims, or at the very least ends up damaging those who live in a real victimhood realm more than you could possibly imagine. You think this is going to help kids? Kids can't go back to school even though they're almost entirely immune to COVID. Hey, how do you feel about humping that Bosu ball?
And if they really were trying to do a critique, they did a bad job of it, but biggest reason is they forgot to critique during the film.
Well,
they
all of
forgot
the journalists,
to say
like
it.
Scott
Because they
Mendelson,
can't, because that would be seen as sexually repressing young
but
women. They can't do it. They can't say young women shouldn't twerk on couches. Young girls, we shouldn't be simulating young girl breasts. They can't, because they've demonized anyone who believes in any sort of modesty as sexually repressive.
What I was saying, like Scott Mendelson from Forbes, he's the film writer, journalist there. He said, everybody, just go watch it. Go watch it. You're talking about it before you watched it. I don't need to watch it to know that it's child porn. I saw the poster, that's enough.
He said, everybody just go watch it. And Joe Biden said, hey, shut up, I'm watching Cuties.
So one thing I definitely want to say is that regardless of whether or not the actual images turn out to be of adults versus minors, or whether or not, cheeky pants or sexually suggestive dancing actually crosses the existing specific statutes that we have, right? Remember, civil case, here's a statute, criminal case, it's even higher, right? For a reason, because you're putting people in jail and you're endangering their lives once they have committed a crime and they're convicted. But what we can't do, and what certainly there's no question that the left is knowingly doing, is saying, no, they didn't go that far. It's not actually child porn, but while ignoring the entirety of the part that is undisputed, is that you have put hundreds of young ladies through these auditions, ultimately focusing on 4 or 5, I think it's 4 or 5 that are actually in the film itself, focusing on them and their sexual suggestiveness. Just, you've been involved in media for a long time. We're involved here as well. The amount of time that has to go into filming something and producing it, how many takes were done? How many times were folks just like, hey, let's just hang out and we're just going to take some photos back here. No big deal. And this is where it comes to the issue of the entire industry itself and focusing on it, not saying anything about the protections that are being needed for children. Why do you think Kevin Spacey got away with what he was able to do?
Yeah.
Why do you think Harvey Weinstein was able to get away with that? Grooming. Yep. This is what it is. It's normalizing the type of
and it's
behavior
an industry where they're
protection.
Rife with accusations of pedophilia.
Absolutely.
By the way, this is not something that you could see happen anywhere else in the country. Go to any Tiara girl talent show, whatever they call them. Are they beauty pageants, Tiara pageants, whatever they call them, and see if you find anything even remotely similar to this. You can go anywhere in the country, and nowhere will you have an entire room full of people where you would screen Cuties and not get a complaint. That's also what's concerning. Is this was given an award at a festival. It went through the production process, the green light process, the distribution process at Netflix. Even after the poster created backlash and they changed it, there wasn't anyone in all of Netflix. This is so commonplace in the entertainment industry that all of them said, you know what? People just think this is going to be something it isn't. Once they see that it's just girls in booty shorts and sports bras and simulated 11-year-old breasts twerking, grinding their privates on each other, they're not going to have a problem with this. No one there said, wait, objection. That's what's so concerning. Right. Do not send your children into this industry, parents. That's also an important message here. They chew them up and spit them out. They eat them alive. What we've seen is enough. It's unacceptable. I don't want that line to be moved. It needs to be moved back.